so big. It's kind of scary. Really bad. Hello, friends. I thought I was ready to do this video, but a part of me is still kind of like getting a panic feeling in my gut when I try to start to talk about this. But I know some of you have been waiting for an update from me because you know that I live in the Asheville area, and so this is just going to be like a very candid, off-the-cuff update of how things are going here. So I live in a little town called Marshall, and Marshall has been on the national news this week because we were really badly hit by Hurricane Helene's flooding.
We lost everything. We lost buildings. We lost irreplaceable cultural heritage. Floodwaters crested at 27 feet.
It's a very cute town right on the French Broad River. And I've kind of gone back and forth about whether I want to talk about where I live for like privacy issues. But I was thinking that in October, I was going to do a video about the little bookstore where I work because October is just such a beautiful month here. I couldn't resist sharing it with you guys at some point. And when all of this happened, I thought that I'm just going to talk about it because it's too big. It's too big not to talk about it. And also, if making this video gets any kind of financial support to the town from any of you who feel inclined, then it is worth it to me to talk about where I live. Also, you're not going to find me at the bookstore anymore because the bookstore is gone. So just to let you know what happened here, we knew that Hurricane Helene was going to hit the area, and the day before, we got a cold front first. So there was a lot of rain and things were already starting to flood, and we were starting to get forecasts that we might enter a major flood stage in Marshall, which would mean that water would start to enter buildings, especially if they weren't like sandbagged. So I was watching the forecast throughout the day, and I saw that the major flood stage was forecasted, and I messaged my boss and asked him if he had moved anything on the lower shelves like up, and he said he was leaving for the day and he was going to do it in the morning. And I was like, the forecast says that it's already going to be flooding in the morning, so if you're going to do it, you should probably do it now. So he went back and he moved some things on lower shelves to higher shelves, and he sandbagged the door, and he like put boards, like heavy boards on the door, all to help protect it from major flood stage. Then I was watching the forecast, and suddenly the forecasted like level of flood stage jumped from like 16 feet in town to 19 feet. And I was like, oh shit. But 19 feet, that would definitely be a mess, but it still wouldn't be like, probably we wouldn't have lost everything. In the morning of September 27th, I was seeing updates from one of the people who lives in a house in town, and she was showing pictures as the floodwaters were starting to come into Marshall, and they were rising very quickly. Like 1 minute, they're just starting to penetrate the town, and like 30 minutes later, they're starting to hit the coffee house, which is like a little bit up. So I was watching this, feeling like just, you know, you just kind of shut down when you're seeing these images. And then my power went out, so I didn't get any more updates. And we're just sitting there in the dark with no way of communicating. The cell phone service immediately switched over to like SOS instead of having any bars. I later found out that our cell phone capacity network in the county was only 8% of what it usually is, which is already bad. Like I can't usually even make calls at the bookstore because our cell network is already not very good. I can only text. So we had no idea what was going on. And the hurricane passed, like the rain stopped, the wind wasn't too bad. So in the afternoon, I walked out of my house, and where I live is not that close to the river. Like I can't see it, I can't hear it. But as soon as I walked out of my house, I could hear this like roar. I walked to where you can usually start to kind of see the river a little bit, and everything was river. Like everything that's normally a road or houses or train tracks or anything was just river now. It was going so fast. And that's when I took the footage that you saw at the top of this video. And I could just feel the force of it like all through my body. The force of the water was so powerful that I'm standing up in a spot where usually the river still seems very far away. And now it just felt like it was like right beneath my feet, and the force of it was so intense. And I was just kind of shaking all over. And you could hear like these very loud booms and cracks of debris that you knew were like cars or houses or something very large hitting obstacles in the river like trees and such. And I was a little worried about landslides on the road, so I probably should have gone home, but there was like this compulsion to see it a little closer, so I walked down to closer to the river where I could see the edge of town. And I just couldn't see anything. I could see like the second story buildings, and that was when I knew that nothing would have survived this flood. And I know a lot of people that live in the floodplain, as well as all the people who have businesses in town. So like I couldn't even process it. I felt like I was just having a panic attack, and I went home and just like breathed and was very numb. And the next morning I walked down all the way to town. Some of my neighbors were out, and we got a little bit of update from one of my neighbors who had driven into Asheville. And I didn't know how bad it was because I was thinking that it's just like, oh, anything along the French Broad River is probably in rough shape. But we didn't have a lot of wind. So I thought, maybe everything else, the River Arts District is probably in bad shape, and, everything by the river. But maybe everything else is fine because the winds seem pretty mellow. And you don't really think about just how many like creeks and rivers are in Asheville normally. Like a lot of them just kind of quietly, you pass over one on a little bridge on the street. You don't really think about it. But he said that all the power was out everywhere. Everything was just black. Nothing was open. It was just total chaos. There was no cell phone or Wi-Fi anywhere. So no one knew what was going on. It's been like 24 hours at this point. The next day, we were able to go into town, and like the floodwaters had mostly receded from town. So we walked down the main street a little bit, and everything was just covered in mud. And the river was still raging very quickly. It was very brown. Everything's covered in this smelly mud, and all the stores and restaurants that I'm used to, windows were blown out. You could look in and see that everything is just like piled in mud, like a foot deep, if not more. The health food store where I go to, the shelves were all piled in mud. And I didn't make it very far before I started having a panic attack again and retreated. As far as we knew, there was kind of nowhere to go, nowhere to get any kind of service, no power. We still had water the entire time, which I thought we would, because I've been through, I should say, I am a native Floridian. I grew up in Florida and spent the first 30 years of my life in Florida. I'm used to hurricanes. I went through all the hurricanes in 2004. The eye of Charlie passed right over my parents' house, and I was staying with them. We're used to hurricanes in Florida. So I'm usually always like a little bit prepared. But in Florida, I never lost water service. I never lost telephone communication. And in Florida, the storm surge can be very violent, but generally everyone with any sense whatsoever will have evacuated. You're not anywhere near the storm surge. So I'd never seen anything like this, like raging river flooding the town. I think of a flood more as like, here's a neighborhood with people getting in canoes. So I hadn't prepared very well compared to how I would in Florida, because I just didn't think that hurricanes could cause this amount of devastation in the mountains, because my thought is like the mountains kind of break up the hurricane, and we could never have anticipated a flood this bad. I mean, I know with climate change, we're probably going to get more floods like this. I feel like I actually read an article like 2 weeks ago saying there would be more severe flooding in the Appalachians because of climate change, and here it is. But there has not been a flood like this in recorded history here. When the waters finally receded, it ended up being worse than the flood of 1916, which is the one that everyone talks about, but no one remembers because 1916 was a long time ago. Only the vampires remember that one. And even 19 feet, a lot of things probably would have been more recoverable, but it ended up at like 23, 26. I've heard a couple different numbers, but it was a lot more than 19, and everything was devastated. So I was making food on my grill. I didn't have any charcoal, but I was like starting fires with some like wet wood and newspaper and like managed to heat some food. And we did have water, although I figured we were probably under a boil water notice, so I was going through the water bottles and like crossing my fingers. The power came back. I don't remember what day the power came back. I think it was like after 3 days. I do know it was just about the point where you have to throw out all the food in your fridge and freezer. So I had just thrown out everything, and then I went to take a nap because that was exhausting. And then the power came back. So when the power came back, we were able to get on the internet and see the full scope of the devastation everywhere and learn that Marshall was not in any way the worst off. In fact, Marshall in some ways made out better than a lot of the other river towns because at least we had a lot of our old buildings still standing, and we have a lot of stuff up on the bypass that's very high up. So that wasn't damaged, like the grocery store, and we never lost, at least my house never lost water. Some houses did for a little bit, but we found out when the power came back on that some towns were just obliterated and that it was so widespread, basically over the entire mountain region. We found out that, people had been swept into the river, and you could hear them screaming if you were nearby, but no one could rescue them. The entire city of Asheville has been without water for over a week now, and they don't even have a timeline for when water service will be restored because the infrastructure was basically destroyed. There's still a lot of people without power. There's still search and rescue operations going on, but there's starting to be a sense of hopelessness for the people that they haven't been able to find. And I've been through hurricanes, like I said, where people lost power for like 3 weeks and roads were covered in debris, and, the Orlando airport got pretty messed up. I've been through stuff. I've never experienced anything like this. I know many people who lost everything, whose homes either got just ravaged by the river or completely swept away. And I know so many people whose workplaces or artist studios are just, they don't have a place to go now. There's nowhere to work. And I finally saw photos of the bookstore, and it was just completely destroyed. It was a little while before I could get in touch with my boss, but he basically told me that he doesn't really have the bandwidth to rebuild the bookstore, which I understand because a used bookstore is not something where you just like slap the walls back up and put in a counter and make an order to replenish your stock. It takes years to curate and sort out all of your donations and all the books that you've sourced. So even if the community were to donate a ton of books to rebuild the place, it would still take so many man hours to sort through them all and decide like what's worth putting out, to organize it. You want it to look like this engaging and quirky place full of treasures. I had spent so many hours listing like hundreds of books on eBay that weren't probably going to get top dollar in the store. All those are gone. We had all these curated treasures on the shelf behind the register that we'd found in thrift stores and antique shops and things that the owner had, been gifted. Like, we just had all these, it's a used bookstore. It's full of so many treasures, both books, decor, artwork. We had records. The owner's 67. Yeah, 67. And he's also kind of taking care of his mom to a certain extent. She is like the most amazing 90-something-year-old woman I've probably ever met. But still, she's in her 90s, so he's been devoting a little more time to making sure she's okay and trying to get her to move in with him. So I can imagine that he probably doesn't want to restart this whole thing. That probably would be like at least 3 years to really get it back to where it was. And he would be 70. And, you know, I don't know that he might change his mind, but I understand if he doesn't want to. But it really hurts. It was a dream job. Not just because I love used books and I've always wanted to own a used bookstore, not really having the energy to actually start one. But this was perfect because he trusted me so much and gave me a lot of leeway in like choosing stock for the store and organizing things and pricing things. And we were really partners there, and he was just the best person to work for. He was such a kind man. Well, I say was like he's dead, but he's fine at least, thank goodness. Like when my cat Oscar suddenly got really sick, he was the first person that I called to ask if he could rush me to the emergency vet, because he was the first person that I thought he would be there and he would do it. He would just close the store and take me to the emergency vet without any questions asked. And the emergency vet is like 45 minutes away, and I've got like a screaming cat the whole time, and I'm like having a panic attack, but he did it, and he waited with me the whole time and brought me home. So that's just the person that Jamie is, and he's really funny and smart and just wonderful to talk to. So I'm really gonna miss working there in every way possible. It was a perfect job. And beyond the bookstore, the town itself, the townspeople are so amazing. Everyone has these little businesses that they poured so much heart and soul into, and they're all such kind people. Like during the pandemic, we got a lot of takeout from Star Diner, which is kind of a nicer restaurant, but what else did we have going on during the pandemic? It was nice to have kind of something decadent when there was nothing else to do. So that was kind of our comfort food. And at one point, I posted about something that was really bumming me out. I don't even remember what it was anymore, but I posted about being really sad and depressed on Facebook. And one of the owners of Star Diner said, like, hey, come on down and we'll give you a free meal to cheer you up. And this is not like the cheapest food, but everybody in town is that kind of person. The kind of person that will help you when you're down. Like everyone in Asheville area are just such thoughtful and creative people. So when things get destroyed in Florida, it's usually like a CVS and an Exxon station and I mean, not that Florida doesn't have small businesses, but generally a lot of it's just kind of like chain store, strip mall stuff. But in Asheville, we had so many small businesses and artist studios from the River Arts District and Biltmore Village going up into Marshall and all the other small towns that are along these rivers and creeks. As well as you have families with all this cultural heritage and history that have been here for generations that live in these old homes along creeks. This area has had such a long cultural heritage, both from people that have been here a long time and people who have been attracted to the area more recently. So a lot of people's life's work or life's passion has been destroyed. But on the bright side of things, the community is really amazing. Pretty much as soon as the storm passed and the floodwater started to recede, the people of Marshall started getting together, this massive, impressively organized volunteer operation where they all started getting down there, clearing out the mud, helping out each other. Pretty soon we had people who own like heavy equipment coming to help. We had people cooking food. Now they found out that there's some kind of toxins in the mud. It's like giving people chemical burns. So now they have to suit up in full PPE to clean up. But we also have like local wellness people, massage therapists and herbalists and nurses and such coming in to help and have like a wellness station. And I feel fairly useless, which I think is part of what's making me so upset. Like, there's times when your main skill is being a writer and a creative type, and you are very wimpy and you get heart palpitations almost as soon as you lift a shovel, and you don't have any practical skills whatsoever. So I felt very useless. Like, when the chips are really down, you don't need a writer. You need somebody who's got a strong back and some real skill at practical matters. So it's a good time to point out that if you are one of those people who wants to be creative, but your day job is just something practical, whether it's going down to work at the grocery store right after a disaster so that people can get food, or if you know how to build a house, or you're a nurse or whatever, the work you do is so valuable. But as a creative type, about all I can do is just keep telling the story of what happened here. And a lot of towns were hit worse than us, but what I know is my town. So if you want to help my town, which everyone is working so hard to rebuild and reopen things as quickly as possible so that people can get back to work, and people who live in the buildings, the apartments above, can get back home, all that. I'm going to drop a few links for local charities and Gofundmes that I know are really connected to the community and will get resources to people as quickly as possible. If you're worried about me, I am relatively fine. I mean, it sucks to lose my part-time job for sure, both emotionally and financially. Relatively, I am in great shape compared to a lot of people who lost their entire livelihood, or in some cases even their homes and all their possessions. So I don't want any like contributions beyond what you would normally give the channel just because you like what I do here. Like, that's always welcome, but I don't want, like, don't give me any like huge super thanks or anything. But if you want to support the town, that would make me feel a little useful, just that I got the word out. And as far as the channel goes, I definitely want to get back to things, and I have some sponsorship deals that like I need to do videos, but my plan is to resume doing regular videos on October 19th, because that will give me, that's a sponsorship video, so I have to get it done like 5 days before that. And that is going to be the video on writing vivid characters that I was going to do my Discord chat in conjunction with, if you're one of my Discord members. So I'm gonna restart the schedule on the 19th with that chat and that video, and from there hopefully just get back to the regular schedule. But that will give me like a week to just kind of recover from all this and keep processing. And there's a lot of crying, just a lot of crying, and like shutting down emotionally at times. So I want to give myself a little time to get past that initial grief shock stage. And I think by the time mid-month rolls around, I'll be feeling a little more normal. So that is my update. There are a lot of people that are worse off than me, and some of you watching or watching later because you might not have power yet, but I know some of you are also in this area. My heart goes out to you. Everyone who is in the path of the storm from Florida into Tennessee who has been affected, especially people who have lost their homes or someone that they cared about or their sole income. I'm giving you a hug from afar and accepting your hugs from afar because, you know, the best thing that we have right now is each other and human connection. And I really appreciate all of the support and all the well wishes and all of the notes that you've given me and your patience and everything else. Hopefully we'll get back to normal-ish talking about writing and all that, which I miss very much. And if this happens to be your first video that you've seen from me, my name is Lydia Foxglove. I am a fantasy author, and I talk about writing craft, fantasy writing, world building, as well as in a general sense, having a creative life from a practical and financial standpoint. And that's what I really want to talk about, and I'm going to get back to it soon. So I will see you guys later. Bye.